Angus Thompson, 68, retired architect who built a peaceful life after losing my wife to cancer 5 years ago. Living in my dream home in Vermont, I never expected betrayal would come from my own daughter. That vacation to Florida was supposed to be my first real break since retirement. Instead, I returned to find strangers living in my house, my belongings gone, and my daughter Jessica smirking at me. "Now you are homeless," she sneered. If only she knew what was coming next. Before I tell you the rest of my story, let me know where you are watching from, and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about family betrayals and unexpected comebacks. This story might just teach you something about protecting yourself from those closest to you. I spent 40 years designing homes for other people, but the house in Vermont was the one I poured my soul into. Sarah and I bought that 5-acre lot the year after we got married, and I sketched the plans on our kitchen table while she was pregnant with Jessica. We built it slowly over 20 years, adding rooms as our savings allowed. Every piece of wood was hand-selected, every window placed to capture the mountain view that Sarah loved so much. The wraparound porch was where Sarah spent her final days. The doctors had given her 3 months after the breast cancer spread to her bones, but my stubborn wife stretched that to 8. She wanted to watch the seasons change one last time from that porch, and she did. The maple trees turned from green to gold to bare, and then one night, she slipped away holding my hand as the first snow began to fall. That was 5 years ago, but sometimes I still make coffee for 2 in the morning before I catch myself. After Sarah died, the house became my anchor. I retired from the firm, turned down consulting jobs, and focused on tending Sarah's garden and finishing the woodworking projects we had planned together. I was finding my way forward, even joining a widower's support group in town and reconnecting with old friends. Jessica visited occasionally, usually when she needed something. Our relationship had always been complicated. She was our only child, and perhaps we spoiled her. Sarah was the disciplinarian while I was the soft touch, always slipping her extra allowance or extending curfews when she batted those eyes at me. After Sarah died, Jessica seemed to pull away, calling less frequently, unless she needed money for some emergency or other. When Jessica introduced me to Doug 3 years ago, something felt off. He had charm in spades and a sales job at a luxury car dealership. He drove a car well above his pay grade and always had stories about deals just about to close. I tried to keep my concerns to myself. Sarah would have told me to trust my daughter's judgment, so I tried. The wedding was extravagant, though Jessica hinted they were having money troubles when asking me to cover additional costs beyond what I had already contributed. I noticed Doug drinking heavily and making risky bets during the bachelor weekend. Still, I wrote it off as pre-wedding jitters and wrote the checks Jessica requested. I wanted her to have her perfect day. After they married, the financial requests became more frequent. First, it was help with the down payment on a house in a neighborhood they couldn't afford. Then it was unexpected car repairs, property taxes they had somehow not budgeted for, and a roof replacement they discovered during the home inspection but decided not to negotiate with the seller. Meanwhile, I noticed Doug had stopped mentioning his job at the dealership. When I asked directly during a Sunday dinner, Jessica quickly interjected that he had moved to a consulting role that allowed more flexibility. Later that evening, I overheard them arguing in the kitchen. Doug was saying something about keeping up appearances, and Jessica was telling him to be more careful around me. The week before my Florida vacation, Jessica stopped by unexpectedly. She wandered the house, commenting on things she remembered from childhood, asking unusual questions about when I had last updated my will and whether I had considered downsizing. I thought perhaps she was genuinely concerned about me living alone in such a large house. She even offered to check on the place while I was gone, something she had never volunteered to do before. "Dad, where do you keep all your important papers? You know, deed to the house, insurance, that kind of thing?" she asked casually while helping me pack. "In my office filing cabinet." "Why do you ask?" I replied, folding a shirt into my suitcase. "Just thinking we should have a plan in case anything happens. Mom was always the organized one," she said, and I felt a pang of grief at the mention of Sarah. "Everything is labeled clearly in the filing cabinet. The key is in my desk drawer." I pointed to the antique roll-top desk Sarah had restored. Jessica nodded, giving me a quick hug before leaving. "Have a great trip, Dad. Don't worry about anything here. I will take care of everything. Those words would come back to haunt me in ways I never could have imagined as I locked up the house and headed to the airport, excited for my first real vacation since Sarah died. 3 weeks in Florida, staying at my old college roommate Walter's condo while he was in Europe. Just me, the beach, and some peace and quiet to figure out what the next chapter of my life should look like. I had no idea that Jessica was already planning to make that decision for me in the most brutal way possible. The Florida sunshine had worked its magic. For the first time in years, I felt rejuvenated. The constant ache of missing Sarah having dulled to a manageable throb rather than the sharp pain it once was. I decided to cut my trip short by 3 days, thinking I might surprise Jessica with dinner and try to reconnect. Maybe I had been too harsh in my judgment of Doug. Maybe it was time to extend an olive branch. The taxi dropped me at the foot of my driveway on a perfect Vermont spring afternoon. The dogwoods Sarah had planted were in full bloom, but something was wrong. An unfamiliar blue sedan sat where my car should have been. The porch furniture had been replaced with pieces I did not recognize. Through the front window, I could see different curtains hanging where Sarah's handmade ones had been. Confusion wrapped around me like fog as I wheeled my suitcase up the familiar path. Perhaps Jessica had loaned the house to friends while I was away, but she would have called to tell me. I pulled out my phone to check for missed messages. Nothing. I pressed the doorbell, hearing the same chime echo through the house. A young woman with a toddler on her hip answered, her expression as confused as mine must have been. "Can I help you?" she asked, shifting the child to her other side. "This is my house," I said, the words sounding ridiculous even as they left my mouth. "I am Angus Thompson." The woman's face changed from confusion to concern. "Just a moment," she said, closing the door partially and calling for someone named Mark. A man in his 30s appeared moments later, protectively positioning himself in the doorway. "Sir, we purchased this house 3 weeks ago. We have all the paperwork if you would like to see it." His tone was polite but firm. "That is impossible. I never sold my house. There must be a mistake." My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. The man disappeared briefly and returned with a folder, showing me legal documents with signatures I did not recognize next to my printed name. A power of attorney form allegedly signed by me giving Jessica authority to conduct the sale. Closing documents, transfer of deed, all the paperwork for a legitimate home sale. "I did not sign these," I said, my hands shaking as I held the papers. "These are forgeries. I need to call my daughter." The young couple exchanged concerned glances, clearly unsure whether they were dealing with a confused elderly man or a legitimate case of fraud. The woman bounced her fussing toddler while the man took out his phone. "Would you like me to call someone for you?" "The police, perhaps," he offered. "No, thank you. I will handle this." I handed back their papers and stepped away, already dialing Jessica's number with trembling fingers. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again and again, each time growing more frantic. On my 4th attempt, I left a message that came out more sharply than I intended. "Jessica, this is your father. I have returned home to find strangers living in my house with sales paperwork I never signed. Call me immediately." I tried Doug's number next. Also voicemail. I left no message. I sat on the curb outside what had been my home for nearly 4 decades, watching as the new owners closed their blinds and occasionally peeked out at me. I could not blame them for their suspicion. In their shoes, I would have already called the police. After 2 hours of waiting and calling, my phone finally rang. Jessica's name appeared on the screen. "Dad, you are back early," she said flatly. No greeting, no explanation. "Jessica, there are people living in my house. They have paperwork showing I sold it to them. What is going on?" I fought to keep my voice calm. "You need to come to our house. I am not discussing this over the phone. Jessica, tell me what is happening right now." The tremor in my voice was now from anger, not shock. "Come to our house or do not." But I am hanging up now. The line went dead. I called a cab, watching as it pulled up to what was no longer my home. The driver asked if I was okay, probably noticing the pallor of my face and the way my hands would not stop shaking. I gave him Jessica and Doug's address, leaning my head against the cool window during the 30-minute drive. Their house sat in an upscale development, a colonial with columns that had always struck me as pretentious. Doug's luxury sports car sat in the driveway, alongside Jessica's new SUV that I had not seen before. My stomach tightened at the sight. Jessica answered the door in designer clothing, her face a mask of cool detachment I did not recognize. This was not the daughter I had raised. She led me to their formal living room without a hug or even a word, gesturing to an uncomfortable-looking chair while she perched on the edge of the sofa. "Where is Doug?" I asked, trying to get my bearings. "Golf," she replied simply. "He will be back later." "Jessica, what is going on? Those people had paperwork showing you sold my house using a power of attorney I never gave you." She did not even have the decency to look ashamed. "We needed the money, Dad. Doug got in over his head with some gambling debts. Bad people were threatening us." The room seemed to tilt. "You sold my house for gambling debts? Without my knowledge or consent? Jessica, that is fraud. It is a crime." She shrugged one shoulder. "You have plenty of money from your retirement accounts. You are old anyway. What do you need a big house for? You could move into a senior living facility. It would be better for you." Each word hit like a physical blow. I struggled to recognize the woman sitting across from me, so coldly dismantling my life. "Where are my things? My furniture? Sarah's belongings?" My voice cracked on my late wife's name. "We sold what we could. The rest is in a storage unit." She tossed a key onto the coffee table between us. "The first month is paid. You will need to figure out the rest." "How could you do this?" I whispered, picking up the key with numb fingers. "That was your mother's home too. The garden she planted, the porch where she died." Something flickered across Jessica's face, a momentary shadow of the daughter I thought I knew, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Mom is dead. She does not care about a garden anymore." I stood, unable to stay in her presence a moment longer. "You have broken the law, Jessica. You have stolen from me, forged my signature, sold property that was not yours to sell." As I moved toward the door, she called after me, her voice carrying a mocking edge I had never heard before. "Where are you going to go, Dad? Now you are homeless." I turned slowly to look at her, this stranger wearing my daughter's face. The triumph in her expression made my blood run cold. "I have friends," I said quietly. "Unlike you, apparently, I have people in my life who would never betray me this way." I walked out, closing the door gently behind me rather than slamming it like every fiber of my being wanted to do. Standing on her porch, I called Walter, explaining in halting sentences what had happened. He immediately offered his guest room for as long as I needed it. That night, in Walter's spare bedroom, I stared at the ceiling, trying to process the magnitude of what had happened. My home, gone. My daughter, revealed as someone capable of unimaginable betrayal. And the cruelest cut of all, her apparent belief that I would simply accept this new reality she had created for me without a fight. As the first light of dawn filtered through unfamiliar curtains, I made a decision. I would not be a victim. I would not be homeless. And I would most certainly not let Jessica's betrayal go unchallenged. The morning after discovering my daughter's betrayal, I called Martin Green, a lawyer who had been both my client and friend for over 30 years. His reaction when I explained the situation moved from professional concern to personal outrage. "Angus, this is not just a family dispute. This is criminal fraud, forgery, and theft," Martin said, his usually measured tone sharp with anger. "We need to move quickly to protect what assets you have left and start building a case." Martin came to Walter's house that afternoon, bringing with him a young associate specializing in elder financial abuse. They spread papers across Walter's dining room table as I recounted everything. Jessica's unusual questions before my trip, the forged signatures, the cold confrontation. "Have you checked your bank accounts?" Martin asked, a question that had not even occurred to me in the shock of losing my home. I pulled up my banking app on my phone, something my grandchildren had taught me to use. My heart sank as I saw the main savings account where I kept most of my liquid assets had been emptied 3 days after I left for Florida. $270,000. Gone. "They got into my bank accounts too," I whispered, showing Martin the screen. His expression darkened. "We need to call all your financial institutions immediately. Freeze everything. Report fraud. And Angus, we need to report this to the police today." The next 48 hours became a blur of phone calls, formal statements, and forms. The bank's fraud department seemed skeptical at first, clearly wondering if this was just a family disagreement about money. The police officer who took my report had the same initial reaction. "Sir, with all due respect, family disagreements about property are usually civil matters," the young officer said, barely looking up from his form. Martin intervened smoothly. "Officer, my client has documented evidence of forged signatures on legal documents and unauthorized access to financial accounts. This is not a disagreement. It is criminal fraud." The officer looked more closely at the paperwork we had brought, his expression changing. "I see. In that case, we will open an investigation. But I should warn you, cases involving family members can be complicated to prosecute." Leaving the police station, I felt a crushing weight of uncertainty. Would anyone actually help me? Or would Jessica and Doug simply get away with destroying my life? My phone buzzed with a text message from Jessica. "Dad, stop making trouble. You will only embarrass yourself. No one will believe you over me." A call followed almost immediately. It was Doug, his voice slick with false concern. "Angus, man, I think you are overreacting here. Jessica was just trying to help you downsize. Move into something more manageable at your age. Making a police report is going a bit far. Do not you think? Is that what you tell yourself, Doug? That stealing my home and emptying my bank account was helping me?" I could barely control my trembling voice. "Look, we can work this out as a family. But if you keep pushing with lawyers and police, you might find yourself cut off from your grandchildren. Is that what you want? Think about it." The threat was thinly veiled, his tone hardening on the final words. The call ended, leaving me shaking with rage and fear. They were now using my grandchildren as leverage, a low blow that told me they would stop at nothing. The complications continued to mount. Martin discovered the young couple who purchased my house had used their entire life savings and taken out a substantial mortgage. They were as much victims as I was, having bought the property in good faith. "Unwinding this transaction will not be simple," Martin explained. "These people did nothing wrong. They cannot be simply evicted while the fraud is sorted out. And frankly, with the amount of equity they have already put in, forcing them out could bankrupt them." Adding to my stress, I learned Jessica had been telling a different story to our extended family and mutual friends. According to her, I had willingly given her the house and money to help with their financial troubles, only to change my mind after returning from vacation. She was painting me as confused, possibly experiencing early dementia, and certainly vindictive. My niece called, her voice hesitant. "Uncle Angus, is everything okay? Jessica says you have been acting strangely, making accusations." "Lisa, Jessica sold my house and emptied my bank account while I was on vacation, using forged documents," I said flatly. A pause. "Oh, that is not what she told us. She said you had agreed to help them with some temporary financial troubles, and then got confused about what you had promised. And you believed that I would give away my home of 40 years without even mentioning it to anyone else in the family?" I could not keep the hurt from my voice. I did think it sounded off, but Jessica said the doctors think you might be having memory issues. Her voice trailed off. The strategic character assassination cut deep. Jessica was not just stealing my property. She was stealing my reputation, my dignity, and my family relationships. The strain began to affect my health. I developed high blood pressure seemingly overnight. Panic attacks would wake me at 3 in the morning, my heart racing as I relived the moment of discovering strangers in my home. I lost weight, my clothes hanging loose on my frame after just 2 weeks. Walter noticed, his concern evident as he watched me pick at my food during dinner. "Angus, you need to see a doctor. This stress is killing you." "I cannot afford a doctor right now," I admitted. "Almost all my money is gone or frozen during the investigation. Medicare will cover some, but not all. I need to be careful until this is resolved." The financial reality of my situation was grim. The small checking account Jessica had not discovered held just enough for basic expenses for a few months. My retirement pension would continue, but it was designed to supplement my savings, not support me entirely. And the house had represented the bulk of my net worth. Meanwhile, Jessica and Doug showed no signs of financial distress. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard they were planning a European vacation. Jessica posted photos of a new diamond tennis bracelet on social media, tagging the exclusive jewelry store where Doug had purchased it. They were flaunting their newfound wealth, seemingly unconcerned about consequences. The first real test of my emotional endurance came at my grandson's 6th birthday party. I had been avoiding family gatherings but could not miss Tommy's birthday. Jessica had always organized these events at her house, and this year was no exception. Walking into their home, seeing the expensive new furniture, and knowing it had likely been purchased with my money, made me physically ill. Jessica greeted me with a cool kiss on the cheek, playing the role of dutiful daughter for the assembled relatives. "Dad, so glad you could make it. Tommy has been asking for his grandpa." Her voice carried just the right note of affectionate concern, loud enough for others to hear. I forced myself to smile for my grandson's sake, accepting a juice box from his little hand and admiring the dinosaur decorations. But throughout the afternoon, I caught Jessica watching me with calculating eyes. Doug worked the room like a politician, subtly dropping comments about helping out family and stepping up when aging parents need support. The final straw came during cake, when Jessica announced they were using part of their recent financial blessing to take Tommy to Disney World. My grandson's excited shriek cut through me like a knife. They were using my money to play the role of generous, indulgent parents, while I sat in borrowed clothes in a borrowed room, uncertain of my future. I left early, making an excuse about not feeling well. It was not a lie. In the car, I finally allowed myself to break down, sobbing like I had not done since Sarah died. The depth of the betrayal was almost incomprehensible. This was my child, my only daughter, the person Sarah and I had raised with love and sacrifice, and she had destroyed my life without apparent remorse. That night, lying awake in Walter's guest room, I reached a moment of clarity. If I continued like this, allowing the stress and heartbreak to consume me, I might not survive to see justice done. Jessica would get everything she wanted: my money, my property, and eventually, my early grave. I needed to find strength I did not know I had. I needed to fight back. The next morning, I called Martin. "What is our next move? I am ready for whatever it takes." Martin was silent for a moment. "Actually, Angus, we may have just discovered something that changes everything. Can you come to my office this afternoon? I think you will want to hear this in person." His tone carried a note I had not heard in weeks: hope. Martin's corner office had always impressed clients with its mahogany furnishings and sweeping views of the city. Today, I barely noticed the trappings of success as I sat across from him, desperate for whatever news had put that confident gleam back in his eyes. "Angus, do you remember the Riverside property?" Martin asked, sliding a folder across his desk. I frowned, momentarily confused. "The rental property? Sarah and I bought it as an investment about 15 years ago. We kept it quiet because we did not want Jessica to know we had extra income. She always had her hand out even then." Martin nodded. "Exactly. When Sarah died, you transferred ownership into the Thompson family trust, naming yourself as trustee and Jessica as the eventual beneficiary. The terms specified she would inherit it after your death, provided certain conditions were met." My confusion deepened. "Yes, but what does that have to do with my house being sold?" Martin leaned forward, a rare smile breaking through his professional demeanor. "Everything. Because here is what Jessica does not know, what she never bothered to investigate before committing fraud. The house she sold was not technically yours to sell." He opened the folder, pointing to a document with Sarah's and my signatures. "When Sarah was diagnosed with terminal cancer, you both decided to place your primary residence into the same trust, with specific succession rules. The house could not be sold without unanimous approval from all named trustees." The implications slowly dawned on me. "And I am not the only trustee." "No, you are not," Martin confirmed. "Sarah insisted on naming me as co-trustee, specifically to protect against any potential pressure from Jessica. She knew your blind spot where your daughter was concerned." A wave of emotion washed over me. Even after death, Sarah was still protecting me. "So the sale Jessica arranged is completely invalid," Martin finished. "She sold a property that was not legally hers to sell, nor even fully yours to sell alone. The trust requires both trustee signatures for any property transfer. I never signed anything. I sat back, stunned. What does this mean for the family who bought it? Their title insurance will cover them, Martin assured me. They are innocent parties who will be made whole. But for Jessica and Doug, his expression hardened. They committed fraud, but gained nothing. The sale will be reversed. Your home will be returned to you. And they still have the gambling debts they were trying to pay off. The magnitude of Jessica's failure hit me. She had betrayed me in the most painful way possible, destroying our relationship forever, and she had not even succeeded in her goal. The cosmic irony would have been amusing if it were not so tragic. What about my bank accounts? I asked. That money will be harder to recover, especially if they have already spent it. But with the fraud clearly established by the invalid house sale, we have a much stronger case for immediate criminal charges. The police will take this very seriously now. Martin outlined our next steps: filing for an emergency injunction to void the house sale, formal criminal complaints against Jessica and Doug, and a civil suit to recover the stolen funds. One more thing, Angus, Martin said as our meeting concluded. The Riverside property? It is worth almost twice what your primary residence is worth in today's market. Jessica sold the wrong house, when she could have legally asked you to sell the more valuable one. The depth of Jessica's incompetence matched the depth of her betrayal. She had not even done her homework before committing a felony. Martin suggested we arrange a meeting with Jessica and Doug, ostensibly to discuss a settlement. Let us not show our full hand yet. I want to see their faces when they realize what they have done. 2 days later, Jessica and Doug arrived at Martin's office, their expressions a mixture of annoyance and smug confidence. Jessica had dressed carefully in conservative clothing, playing the role of concerned daughter rather than the thief she had become. Doug wore an expensive new watch that I strongly suspected had been purchased with my money. Dad, this has gone far enough, Jessica began as soon as we were seated in Martin's conference room. You are only embarrassing yourself with these accusations. Mr. Thompson has not made accusations, Martin interrupted smoothly. He has filed factual reports of documented fraud, forgery, and theft. Doug leaned forward with the practiced charm of a salesman. Look, Martin, we understand Angus is upset about the changes. Change is hard at his age, but he verbally agreed to help us, and now he is having second thoughts. This happens with elderly parents sometimes. I watched them perform their rehearsed routine, marveling at their confidence. They truly believed they would walk out of this room victorious. Before we go further, Martin said, I would like to clarify exactly what property was sold. Jessica, can you confirm the address? Jessica rattled off my home address, the place where she had grown up. And you arranged this sale using a power of attorney, allegedly signed by your father? He signed it before his trip. Jessica lied smoothly. He just does not remember. That is what concerns us about his mental state. Martin nodded thoughtfully. I see. And did you happen to research the property title before arranging the sale? A flicker of uncertainty crossed Jessica's face. The title was clean. The sale went through without any problems. So you did not know the property was held in the Thompson family trust, not in your father's name alone? Jessica's confident facade cracked slightly. What are you talking about? The house is in Dad's name. It always has been. Martin slid a copy of the trust documents across the table. Your mother and father transferred the property into trust 15 years ago, with your father as primary trustee and me as co-trustee. Any sale requires both our signatures. The color drained from Jessica's face as she scanned the document. Doug grabbed it from her hands, his eyes widening as he read. This cannot be right, he muttered. It is absolutely correct, Martin assured him, which makes the sale Jessica arranged completely invalid. The buyers will get their money back through title insurance, and your father will get his house back. Jessica's carefully constructed persona crumbled. But we already used that money to pay off Doug's gambling debts. We cannot give it back. The admission hung in the air, damning in its directness. So you admit to selling the house without proper authorization and using the proceeds? Martin asked, his tone conversational, though I could see him making notes. Doug turned on Jessica, his charm evaporating. Why did not you check this? You said it would be simple. Now we are still in debt and facing fraud charges. Jessica's composure dissolved entirely. You pushed me into this. You said those guys would break your legs if we did not pay them. I did not tell you to forge your dad's signature on legal documents. That was your brilliant plan." They turned on each other like cornered animals, each revelation more damning than the last. Doug had lost over $175,000 gambling online and with local bookies. Jessica had maxed out their credit cards trying to cover his losses before deciding to target my assets. They had been planning the theft for months, waiting for an opportunity when I would be away. As their accusations flew back and forth, I sat in silence, watching the daughter I thought I knew reveal her true character. This was not a momentary lapse in judgment or a desperate act in extremis. This was calculated, premeditated betrayal. "Enough," I finally said, my quiet voice cutting through their argument. They fell silent, perhaps remembering I was still in the room. "Jessica, I have one question. Did you think about your mother at all when you did this? Did you remember it was her home too?" Jessica could not meet my eyes. "Mom would have wanted me to be taken care of. Your mother worked 2 jobs to put herself through college. She never took the easy path or stole what was not hers. She would be ashamed of what you have become." The words hit harder than I expected. Jessica flinched as if I had slapped her, tears filling her eyes. For a moment, I glimpsed the child she had once been. The daughter Sarah and I had loved unconditionally, but the moment passed quickly. Doug put a protective arm around her shoulders, his expression hardening. "So what happens now? You got us in here to gloat?" Martin took control of the meeting again, his tone strictly professional. "What happens now is this. We are filing criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and grand theft. The house sale will be reversed, and we will be pursuing civil action to recover the stolen funds." "We do not have the money to pay back," Jessica protested. "It is gone. Then the court will determine suitable restitution," Martin replied calmly, "which could include garnishment of wages, seizure of assets, and potentially incarceration." The reality of their situation finally seemed to dawn on them both. Doug slumped in his chair while Jessica began to cry in earnest. The tears I suspected were at least partly tactical. "Dad, please," she sobbed. "We can work this out as a family. Do not do this." I looked at my daughter, trying to find some remnant of the person I had raised. "You stopped treating me as family the moment you decided to steal everything I had. You called me homeless to my face and laughed. What would you have done if Martin had not discovered the trust? Left me destitute in my old age?" She had no answer, only more tears and weak protestations. As Martin outlined the legal consequences they faced, I felt no satisfaction, no triumph, only a profound sadness. I had lost more than a house and money. I had lost my only child to greed and deception. The Jessica I thought I knew was gone, if she had ever truly existed at all. When the meeting concluded, Jessica made one last tearful appeal as we stood to leave. "Dad, we are your family, your only family. If you do this, you will die alone." I looked at her, this stranger who shared my blood but apparently none of my values. I would rather die alone with my integrity than live surrounded by people who would steal the roof over my head and mock my pain. Walking out of that conference room, I felt a strange sense of liberation beneath the sadness. The worst had happened. The betrayal had been complete, and yet I was still standing. I would get my home back. I would rebuild my finances. And most importantly, I would no longer live with the illusion that Jessica's love was something I could count on. The truth, painful as it was, had set me free. The revelation about the trust and the confrontation in Martin's office marked a crucial turning point, but I still faced difficult decisions about how to proceed. Criminal charges would likely send Jessica and possibly Doug to prison. While part of me felt they deserved nothing less, another part remembered holding Jessica as a newborn, teaching her to ride a bike, dancing with her at her wedding. After a sleepless night weighing my options, I asked Martin to meet me for breakfast at a quiet diner near his office. "I have been thinking about how to handle this," I told him, stirring my coffee absently. "I want my house back and my money returned, but I am not certain I want to see my only child in prison." Martin studied me carefully. "What are you considering?" "Conditional mercy," I replied. "I will not press criminal charges if, and only if, Jessica and Doug agree to my terms." I outlined my conditions. Mandatory financial counseling for both of them, gambling addiction treatment for Doug, family therapy to address the patterns that led to this betrayal, and supervised access to any financial decisions involving family money until certain benchmarks were met. No blank check forgiveness, I explained. No easy way out. But a path forward that does not include orange jumpsuits. Martin looked skeptical. Angus, I respect your compassion, but these are not teenagers who made a mistake. They are adults who committed calculated fraud and showed no remorse until they were caught. I know, I sighed, and perhaps I am being a fool again, but I keep thinking about what Sarah would want. She would be furious with Jessica, but I do not think she would want our only daughter in prison if there was another way. Martin reluctantly agreed to present my offer, though he insisted we maintain the threat of criminal prosecution as leverage. The moment they violate any condition, we file charges. No third chances. We arranged another meeting at Martin's office the following day. Jessica arrived alone, explaining that Doug had business he could not reschedule. Martin and I exchanged glances, both recognizing the excuse for what it was. Jessica looked terrible, her usual polished appearance replaced by shadows under her eyes and hair pulled back carelessly. She sat with none of her previous confidence, hands twisting nervously in her lap. Martin presented my offer methodically, emphasizing that this was an alternative to prosecution, not an absence of consequences. As he outlined each condition, Jessica's expression cycled through disbelief, relief, and finally calculation. "So I just need to go to some counseling and therapy, and this all goes away?" she asked when Martin finished. "No," I said firmly. "Nothing goes away. You still betrayed my trust in the most fundamental way possible. You still attempted to steal my home and savings. You still lied to family members about my mental state. None of that disappears. But you will not press charges if I do these things," she pressed. "If you comply fully with every condition, I will not pursue criminal penalties. But make no mistake, Jessica, our relationship will never be what it was. Trust, once broken, cannot simply be glued back together." She nodded slowly, then launched into what I recognized as her well-practiced manipulation routine. First came tears and vulnerability. "I was so scared, Dad. Doug kept saying these people would hurt us if he did not pay them." When that did not soften my expression, she pivoted to defensiveness. "You never really needed all that money anyway. You live so simply, and we have a family to support." Seeing neither approach was working, she tried anger. "Mom would have helped us without all these humiliating conditions. She would have understood." Finally, she attempted guilt. "What about Tommy and Ella? Are you going to keep their grandfather from them over money?" I watched this performance with new clarity, recognizing tactics she had likely been using on me for years. "Jessica, I am offering you a chance to avoid prison and rebuild some semblance of a relationship with me. Take it or leave it. But spare me the emotional manipulation. It will not work anymore." She stared at me, perhaps truly seeing me for the first time in years, not as an ATM or a pushover or a sentimental old man, but as a person with boundaries she had violated beyond forgiveness. "Fine," she said finally. "I will do the counseling and whatever else you want. But what about the money? We really did use it to pay off Doug's debts. We cannot give it back." "The court will determine a repayment plan," Martin explained. "It will likely involve garnishment of wages and possibly liquidation of assets. We will lose our house," Jessica said quietly. "Yes," I acknowledged. "You probably will. Perhaps you can now appreciate the irony of that situation." She flinched, but said nothing. While Jessica agreed to my conditions, implementing them proved complicated. The innocent family who had purchased my house needed to be made whole through the title insurance company. The process would take weeks, during which I remained in Walter's guest room, living out of my suitcase and the few boxes of possessions I had retrieved from the storage unit. A more disturbing development occurred just 3 days after our meeting. Jessica called in tears to tell me Doug had emptied their joint accounts and disappeared, leaving only a note saying he was sorry it came to this. Whether he had fled town to escape gambling debts, legal consequences, or simply his marriage remained unclear. "He took everything, Dad," she sobbed. "The little money we had left, his clothes, even Tommy's college fund we had just started. I do not know what to do. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to fall back into the familiar pattern of rescuing Jessica from her poor choices. But the memory of her mocking "now you are homeless" comment remained too fresh. "You will need to contact the police about the missing funds," I said evenly, "and I suggest speaking with a divorce attorney. My conditions still stand, Jessica. I expect you to begin counseling this week." "How can I afford counseling now? Doug took everything." "You have a job," I reminded her. "And unlike me 2 weeks ago, you still have a home." She was silent for a moment. "You are really not going to help me through this?" "I am helping you by not pressing charges and by holding you accountable," I replied. "Real help is not always writing a check, Jessica. Sometimes it is refusing to continue destructive patterns." The conversation ended with her angry and frustrated, but I held firm to my boundaries. In the weeks that followed, Jessica did begin counseling, though more from fear of prosecution than genuine desire for change. Doug remained missing, leaving Jessica to face the consequences of their actions largely alone. Meanwhile, I focused on reclaiming my life. The title insurance company worked through the process of unwinding the fraudulent sale, compensating the innocent buyers while preparing to return my property. Martin arranged for a thorough security sweep of the house before my return, changing locks and adding a modern alarm system. Surprisingly, I developed an unexpected connection with the family who had briefly owned my home. Mark and Diane Lawson were devastated to lose the house they had thought was their forever home. But once they understood they were victims of fraud and would be financially protected, their anger turned to compassion. "We found some photo albums in the attic that the movers must have missed," Diane told me when we met to arrange the transition. "Family pictures going back decades. We kept them safe for you." These simple acts of decency from strangers stood in stark contrast to my own daughter's betrayal, a painful comparison I could not help but make. When I finally returned to my house nearly 6 weeks after discovering the fraud, the emotions were complicated. Home should have felt like a sanctuary, but it now carried the taint of violation. Jessica had been in these rooms, methodically planning to steal everything from me. Strangers had slept in my bedroom, cooked in my kitchen, lived their lives in spaces still haunted by Sarah's memory. Standing in the living room, surrounded by the furniture and belongings the Lawsons had returned, I made another decision. I would reclaim this space on my terms. Some rooms would be remodeled, others repurposed. Sarah's garden, which had been neglected during the weeks of legal limbo, would be restored and expanded. I called a real estate agent the next day, not about my primary residence but about the Riverside property, the investment house Jessica had not known about. "I would like to sell it," I told the agent, "as soon as possible. The proceeds from that sale would restore my financial security, with enough left over for a significant donation." After careful research, I decided half the money would go to a gambling addiction recovery center and programs supporting seniors who had experienced financial abuse from family members. Jessica, meanwhile, hit rock bottom. With Doug gone, their shared debts mounting, and foreclosure on their house looming, she finally called me from a place of genuine desperation rather than tactical manipulation. "I got fired yesterday," she admitted, her voice small and defeated. "The company found out about the fraud charges that were filed before your offer. They said it violated their ethics policy." "I am sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I took no pleasure in her suffering. "I do not know what to do anymore, Dad," she whispered. "I have ruined everything." "Yes," I agreed quietly. "You have damaged many things that cannot be easily repaired. But that does not mean you cannot build something new, something better." "How?" "I have no job, no husband, a house I am about to lose, and 2 kids who do not understand why their world is falling apart." "You start by continuing the counseling, by taking full responsibility without blaming Doug or circumstances or me, by making amends where possible and accepting consequences where necessary." The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of all that had happened and all that remained unresolved. "Would you have lunch with me next week?" she finally asked. "Just to talk. I will pay," she added quickly, "or at least buy my own meal. I know I cannot expect you to pay for anything." It was a small gesture, but perhaps the first genuine step toward whatever new relationship might be possible between us. "Yes," I said after a moment. "We can have lunch." The road ahead would be long and uncertain. Trust had been shattered, wounds inflicted that might never fully heal. But as I looked out at Sarah's garden, where spring blooms were pushing through soil that had seemed barren just weeks before, I allowed myself to hope that growth, however painful, remained possible. The 6 months following Jessica's betrayal became a time of unexpected transformation. With Martin's guidance, I created a comprehensive estate plan that left nothing to chance or manipulation. My will, power of attorney, healthcare directives, and financial arrangements were reorganized with multiple layers of professional oversight. "No one person will have unchecked access to your assets," Martin explained as we finalized the documents. "Not even me. The system of checks and balances means any unusual activity will trigger automatic reviews." This practical restructuring provided security, but I still struggled with the emotional aftermath of Jessica's actions. At Walter's suggestion, I began meeting with Dr. Eleanor West, a counselor specializing in family betrayal and financial abuse of seniors. "What you are experiencing is a form of grief," Dr. West explained during our first session. "You have lost not just property and money, but trust, security, and the daughter you thought you knew." Through our weekly conversations, I began to recognize patterns I had missed. How I had enabled Jessica's financial dependence since childhood. How I had ignored warning signs about Doug because I wanted my daughter to be happy. How Sarah had tried to establish boundaries that I often undermined. "Your late wife seems to have been more clear-eyed about these dynamics," Dr. West observed. "The trust she insisted on creating ultimately protected you. Sarah was always the practical one," I admitted. "I was the dreamer, the softy. She used to say I never met a stray I did not want to feed, including people who took advantage of my generosity." Working through these realizations proved painful, but necessary. I joined a support group for elderly victims of family financial abuse, finding both comfort and clarity in hearing others' stories. Many had experienced similar betrayals by adult children, often following patterns remarkably similar to mine. Harold, a retired teacher whose son had emptied his retirement accounts, became a particular friend and ally. "The hardest part is not the money," he told me over coffee after one meeting. "It is looking at someone you have loved their entire life and wondering if you ever really knew them at all." Those words crystallized exactly what I had been feeling. Had I ever truly known Jessica? Or had I been so determined to see her through a father's idealizing eyes that I had missed who she really was? My home, once reclaimed, needed transformation as well. I hired contractors to remodel the kitchen where Jessica and I had had countless conversations, her deception apparently already forming even as we shared meals. I converted Sarah's sewing room, which had remained untouched since her death, into a new home office. The master bedroom received new furniture, removing the bed where I had lain awake, imagining a secure future for my daughter. The most healing project, however, was Sarah's garden. I expanded it, adding plants she had always wanted but we had never found space for. Working in the soil, I often felt her presence most strongly, not as a ghost but as a continuing influence. What would Sarah think of all that had happened? She would be heartbroken about Jessica, but would want me to protect myself while leaving some door, however narrow, open to potential reconciliation. My relationship with Jessica entered a new, carefully structured phase. Our first lunch had been awkward, filled with long silences and careful navigation around painful subjects. But it represented a beginning. Without Doug's influence and with consistent therapy, Jessica slowly began to show glimmers of genuine remorse rather than tactical apologies designed to manipulate. She found a new job, more modest than her previous position but enough to support herself and the children while she sold the house she could no longer afford. "I found an apartment near Tommy's school," she told me during our third monthly lunch. "It is small, but it is what I can manage now." I nodded, neither offering financial help nor criticizing her reduced circumstances. This was the natural consequence of her actions, and experiencing it fully was necessary for whatever growth might be possible. The most difficult moment in our cautious rebuilding came when Jessica asked if she could visit my house for the first time since her betrayal. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready to see her in the space she had tried to take from me. "Why do you want to come?" I asked directly. She considered the question seriously before answering. "Partly to see the changes you have made, partly to apologize in the actual place where I caused harm, and partly because avoiding it forever seems like pretending it never happened." After discussing it with Dr. West, I agreed to a brief visit. Jessica arrived without her children, respecting my unstated preference not to complicate the already emotional encounter. Standing in the foyer, she looked smaller somehow, diminished not just by circumstances but by the weight of her actions. She noticed the changes immediately. New paint, rearranged furniture, Sarah's photographs relocated to different walls. "You have made it yours again," she observed quietly. "I had to," I replied. "The house you tried to sell does not exist anymore. Neither does the father you thought you could manipulate without consequences." She nodded, accepting the hard truth without defense. We walked through each room, the silence between us filled with unspoken memories and regrets. In Sarah's garden, now flourishing with new plantings, Jessica finally broke down. "Mom would be so disappointed in me," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She trusted me to take care of you, and instead, I became someone who would leave you homeless." "Your mother wanted us both to be our best selves," I said after a moment. "She would be disappointed in your choices, yes, but she would want you to find your way back to the person she raised you to be." That visit marked a subtle shift in our healing process. The damage remained, the trust still fragmented, but somewhere beneath the pain, the faintest foundation for something new had begun to form. Unexpectedly, my social circle expanded during this period of rebuilding. Walter, who had sheltered me during my temporary homelessness, became a regular dinner companion. Martin and his wife included me in their monthly dinner parties. And most surprising of all, I developed a friendship with Mark and Diane Lawson, the couple who had briefly owned my house. After finding their new home, they invited me for dinner, a gesture that touched me deeply. "We know this whole situation has been awful for you," Diane said as she served dessert. "But we wanted you to know that good people still outnumber the others." These new connections reinforced a lesson Sarah had often tried to teach me. Family is not just defined by blood. Sometimes the people who treat us with the most care and respect are those who have no obligation to do so. As the one-year anniversary of the betrayal approached, I faced decisions about the upcoming holidays. Jessica had tentatively asked if she and the children could visit for a few hours on Christmas Day. "I understand if it is too soon," she added quickly. "We can continue with our lunches instead if that feels safer." I considered her request carefully, consulting both Dr. West and my own healing heart. The Jessica who had mockingly called me homeless seemed increasingly distant from the subdued, gradually more accountable woman I now met monthly for carefully bounded conversations. "You and the children can come for Christmas lunch," I finally told her. "From noon until 3. I will have other guests joining later in the afternoon." It was a limited invitation, nowhere near the day-long family celebrations of the past, but it represented a significant step. Jessica accepted the boundaries without protest, another small sign of possible growth. As I prepared my home for this tentative family reunion, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. I had lost nearly everything, then found strength I never knew I possessed. I had seen the worst in my only child, then cautiously witnessed her difficult path toward becoming someone different, perhaps even someone better. Most importantly, I had rediscovered myself not as Jessica's father or even as Sarah's widower, but as Angus Thompson, a man of resilience, compassion, and newly discovered wisdom about where to direct that compassion. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed me had instead, through pain and struggle, helped me become more fully myself. The garden Sarah had planted continued to grow, different now but still beautiful. And so, I hoped, would whatever careful new relationship might be possible with my daughter, founded not on illusion but on clear-eyed acceptance of who we both truly were. 1 year and 4 months after discovering my daughter had sold my house out from under me, I stood in the driveway of a new home, watching the movers carry in the last of my belongings. The house was smaller than my previous one, part of a planned community for active seniors in a town 30 miles from where I had lived with Sarah. The decision to sell my original home had come gradually, a realization that while I had reclaimed the space physically, emotionally I was ready for a fresh start. "This place suits you," Martin observed as he helped me arrange my home office. "Good security system, neighbors close by, and no stairs to navigate as you get older. Plus a community garden where I have already reserved 2 plots," I added with a smile. Sarah would approve of the practical considerations, though she might question all the social activities on the community calendar. "You will skip the singles bingo night, I assume," Martin teased, knowing how I valued my solitude. "Most definitely. But the woodworking shop and the volunteer committee have potential." This move represented the final step in transforming crisis into opportunity. With the proceeds from selling both properties, I had established financial security for myself and created the Thompson Elder Protection Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to educating seniors about financial abuse prevention and providing emergency assistance to elderly victims of family fraud. The foundation had already helped 12 seniors in situations similar to mine, providing temporary housing, legal assistance, and counseling. Harold, my friend from the support group, had joined the board of directors, bringing his experience as an educator to our outreach programs. Jessica had maintained steady progress in her personal rehabilitation. After a year of consistent therapy, financial counseling, and demonstrable responsibility, we had gradually expanded our contact beyond monthly lunches. She now brought Tommy and Ella for dinner every other Sunday. Visits that remained bounded by clear time limits, but had grown more relaxed and genuine. Doug had eventually resurfaced in Arizona, where he faced charges for other financial irregularities unrelated to our situation. He and Jessica had divorced, a process she navigated with surprising dignity and minimal drama. The children adapted to their changed circumstances with the resilience typical of young people, though Tommy occasionally asked difficult questions about why his father never called. My relationship with my grandchildren had actually improved through this crisis. Without Doug and Jessica's materialistic influence constantly present, I found opportunities to connect with the children in simpler, more meaningful ways. Ella discovered a love for gardening, while Tommy showed unexpected interest in my woodworking projects. The Christmas gathering at my new home marked an important milestone. Jessica arrived precisely at the agreed-upon time, the children carrying small, obviously handmade gifts. My other guests included Walter, Martin, and his wife, and 2 couples from my new community who had become friends. Watching Jessica interact respectfully with these people who had supported me through her betrayal demonstrated how far she had come. She no longer attempted to monopolize my attention or subtly undermine my other relationships. When Martin mentioned a recent donation to the foundation, she listened with apparent interest rather than changing the subject to her needs. After the children had opened their gifts, Jessica handed me a small envelope. "This is not much, but it is a start," she said quietly. Inside was a check for $2,000, a modest sum compared to what she had stolen, but significant given her current salary. More meaningful than the amount was the note attached. "Repayment plan, installment 1 of many. Thank you for the second chance I did not deserve." I nodded my acknowledgement, tucking the envelope away without comment. We both understood this was not about the money, but about demonstrating commitment to making amends. As the afternoon progressed, I found myself reflecting on the profound lessons of the past 16 months. I had learned that security does not come from property or possessions, but from self-knowledge, clear boundaries, and the courage to enforce them. I had discovered the crucial difference between helping and enabling, between generosity and self-sacrifice. Most importantly, I had learned that forgiveness is not a single moment of absolution, but a complex, ongoing process that requires accountability from the person who caused harm and self-protection from the person who was harmed. After my guests departed, I sat on my new porch watching the winter sunset. The garden plots lay dormant, waiting for spring planting. In my mind, I composed a letter to Sarah, updating her on all that had transpired since her death. I would tell her about Jessica's betrayal and gradual redemption, about my temporary homelessness and unexpected new friends, about the foundation helping others avoid our daughter's mistakes. Mostly, I would tell her about the strength I had discovered in myself, strength she had always seen even when I had not. "You were right about the trust," I whispered to the fading light. "You were right about so many things." The painful journey had transformed me from a passive victim to an active advocate, from someone defined by loss to someone characterized by purpose. At 70, I had not expected to begin again, yet here I was, creating a new life rich with intention and meaning. As darkness fell, I made one final note in the journal Dr. West had encouraged me to keep. "True security," I wrote, "lies not in what we possess, but in who we become through challenge." The house Jessica sold was just a structure. The home I have built within myself cannot be taken away. I closed the journal, feeling a sense of completion. The story that began with betrayal had evolved into one of resilience, wisdom, and carefully reconstructed trust. Not all broken things could be repaired to their original state, but sometimes the new configuration held its own kind of beauty, like the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is mended with gold, honoring the damage rather than hiding it. What has your family taught you about trust and forgiveness? Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship after a serious betrayal, or set boundaries with someone you love? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and if my story resonated with you, hit that like and subscribe button to hear more tales of resilience and renewal. Your support helps this channel reach others who might need to hear they are not alone in their family struggles. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, it is never too late to reclaim your power and rewrite your story.